On the morning her chair tried to kill her, Avery Locke told the janitor, "Don't talk to me." By noon, he'd quietly saved her board meeting from a disaster no spreadsheet had predicted. And by the time
I'm
she
so
stepped up to face the
sorry.
board, she realized the next thing they wanted to cut was
Avery.
him. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. And drop your city in the comments. Let's see where love finds us. By 7:12 a.m., the top floor already smelled like money and burnt coffee. Avery Locke stepped out of the elevator and into the hush of glass and marble, the kind of silence that made every heel click sound like a performance. Her fitted navy dress hugged her thick, curvy body, soft waist cinched by a leather belt, full hips swaying with each step, the neckline just low enough to look effortless and expensive. Her hair, honey blonde and glossy, fell in loose waves that brushed her shoulders. Anyone watching would have thought she was gliding. Inside, her stomach was a tight, sour knot. First board meeting as CEO. She passed a cluster of assistants who straightened when they saw her, eyes flicking to their screens, pretending they hadn't been staring. Avery gave them the kind of quick, polished smile she had practiced in front of a bathroom mirror at 14. Pleasant, untouchable, controlled. "Morning, Miss Locke," one of them said. "Morning," she replied without slowing. Her office door closed behind her with a soft, padded thud. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled weak winter light across the room. The skyline glittered, a jagged promise she'd fought years to reach. On her desk, someone had carefully arranged today's board packets in a perfectly squared stack, her name embossed at the top of the agenda. Avery dropped her bag, exhaled, and spun her chair toward herself. "Okay," she whispered. "We are not going to screw this up." She sat. For half a second, everything was normal. Then the right side of the chair gave out with a loud crack. The world tilted. Avery's stomach dropped as the chair lurched sideways, a wheel catching and skidding. She flailed for the desk, fingers scrambling until they caught the edge. Her hip slammed into the armrest, sending a sharp bolt of pain up her side. "Shit," she hissed through her teeth. She froze, listening. No footsteps running toward her office, no gasps. Good. The last thing she needed was someone watching the new CEO almost eat marble because of faulty furniture. She eased herself up, heart hammering in her chest, and glared down at the traitorous chair. One of the lower brackets was bent, a wheel hanging at a pathetic angle. She nudged it with the tip of her heel. It wobbled like a drunk. Of course this would happen today. Avery snatched up her phone and jabbed at the building services contact. "Facilities," a bored voice answered. "This is Avery Locke on 35, she said, sharper than she intended. "My chair just tried to kill me. I need someone here to fix it, or replace it, preferably before I break my neck in front of the board." There was a pause, then the sound of keys tapping. "Got it, Miss Locke. I'll send someone right up." She hung up before she said something she'd regret and paced behind her desk, arm still throbbing. Her reflection in the window stared back at her. Full curves, smooth makeup, eyes a little too bright. "You wanted this," she reminded herself. "You fought for this." And still, beneath the pride, there was that old whisper. "They're waiting for you to fail." A soft knock at the door. "Come in," she called. The door opened, and a man stepped in, the hallway light catching on the dark blue of his coveralls. He was taller than she remembered, broad across the shoulders, the kind of strength that came from lifting things that couldn't argue back. Deep brown skin, neatly trimmed beard, close-cropped black hair. His name badge read, Malik Harris, custodial. Avery realized she had seen him before, late at night when most of the floor was dark. She'd caught glimpses, him pushing a cart down the hallway, quietly emptying trash, wiping away the day's mess so her world looked spotless in the morning. "Miss Locke?" he said. His voice was low, steady. "I'm Malik. I heard your chair tried to take you out." She didn't smile. Not because it wasn't funny, but because if she let herself relax, the anxiety might pour through the cracks and drown her. "It's broken," she said instead, gesturing. "I have a board meeting in less than 2 hours. I need it fixed." "Yes, ma'am." His gaze flicked to the chair, then back to her. "Mind if I take a look?" "That's why you're here, isn't it?" The words came out cooler than she intended. He didn't flinch. He walked to the chair and tipped it onto its side with an easy motion, revealing the underside, metal bracket bent in an ugly arc, bolt half sheared, wheel hanging on out of habit rather than function. "There's your problem," he murmured. "This part's been stressed for a while." "That's the premium executive line," she said, more defensive than made sense. "We spent enough on these." "With respect," he said quietly, "premium doesn't always mean strong. They bought them in bulk. He hesitated, choosing his words. "Pretty, but not built for real weight." Her jaw clenched. It wasn't lost on her that real weight meant this chair had to hold her curves, her stress, the hours she stayed late, not the delicate, straight-lined women who flitted in and out of meetings and then went home. "I can reinforce it," he continued. "Replace the wheel, straighten the bracket, add a support plate. It'll hold until we can justify a new one in the budget." "Justify a new one," she repeated, bitterness cutting through her chest. "I'm the CEO. I don't need to justify a chair." He glanced up at her then, and for the first time she noticed the way his eyes were, soft but direct, like he was used to looking at people who didn't see him. "With respect, ma'am," he said, "you still had to, or you wouldn't be this mad about a broken chair." The words landed harder than she expected. Her spine stiffened. "Is this a therapy session now?" "No, ma'am," he said immediately. "Just trying to make sure you don't hit the floor again." He turned his attention fully to the chair, pulling a compact toolkit from a side pocket. Metal clicked softly as he set pieces on the carpet. Replacement wheels, a slim steel plate, a wrench. His big hands moved with deliberate care, loosening bolts, testing the give of each joint. Avery watched, arms folded over her chest, irritation pressing against something more fragile. The way he focused made her uneasy, like the chair mattered, like her comfort mattered, like this wasn't just another task on a checklist. "Does it always do that?" she asked, voice tight. He paused. "Do what?" "Talk back," she said. "Comment on your clients." "My clients?" One corner of his mouth lifted. "You know what I mean." He studied her for a breath. "No, ma'am," he said. "I don't usually say much. People don't really want to hear from the janitor." "Then don't," she said quickly, the words coming out sharper than she meant. "Just fix the chair. I don't have time for conversation this morning." A flicker passed over his face, something like hurt, quickly swallowed. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "Understood." Silence fell heavy. The only sounds were the soft scrape of metal, the quiet turn of his wrench. Avery turned back to her laptop, pretending to read while the screen blurred. Her own words echoed in her head. "Don't talk to me." It wasn't really about him. It was about the email from a board member last night, asking if she felt ready to lead. The subtle emphasis like a hand on the back of her neck pushing down. It was about the whispers in the hallways when she'd been promoted, the way people said young and woman and meant temporary. But he didn't know any of that. All he knew was a rich white woman in a tight dress telling him to be invisible. She stole a glance. He was crouched now, bracing the chair with his knee, using every bit of his strength to bend the metal back into shape. The muscles in his forearms flexed with the effort, veins standing out under his skin. He worked like someone who had been fixing things his whole life, things other people broke without thinking. "Do you fix a lot of these?" she asked before she could stop herself. He didn't look up. "Chairs? Yeah, people lean back when they're stressed, rock on two wheels, put their feet up. Everything gives somewhere." "Is that your professional opinion?" she asked dryly. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. There was a hint of warmth in it now. "Stress will break whatever has the weakest joint." She swallowed. "And what's the weakest joint here?" she asked, because she didn't want to think about what he might say if she asked about herself. He tapped the bent bracket lightly. "They made this part pretty and thin. It wasn't meant to carry what the rest of it promised." The words lingered in the air between them. Pretty and thin. Not built to carry what was promised. He finished tightening the last bolt, then flipped the chair upright and tested it with his own weight, sitting and rocking gently. It held steady, no wobble, no creak. "All right," he said, standing. "You're good, Miss Locke. I'd still recommend replacing it soon, but this will hold. You won't hit the floor today." She hesitated, then walked around the desk and lowered herself into the chair. It felt different, solid, grounded. The pain in her hip eased as she shifted. "Thank you," she said, softer than before. "You're welcome." He picked up his tools, glanced once at her computer screen where the board agenda glowed. "Big day?" "Yes." "You'll be fine." he said like it was a simple fact. Chair's not your weakest point. She almost smiled. Almost. That'll be all, she said instead, choosing distance over whatever strange comfort had just brushed past her. He nodded and headed for the door. His hand was on the handle when she added, "Next time, if something breaks, just come. You don't need to talk. Just do your job." He paused, his shoulders tightening almost imperceptibly. He didn't turn around. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I'll remember that." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Avery stared at it for a long moment, the room suddenly too quiet, the chair beneath her steady and sure. She turned back to her screen, to the waiting numbers and names and expectations. She told herself it was good that he understood the rules. Walls up, rolls clear, no unnecessary words. She told herself she had bigger problems than a janitor's feelings. And somewhere deep in her chest, where her armor didn't quite reach, something small and uncomfortable twisted, like a joint under too much strain, waiting to crack. By 8:46 a.m., the entire floor buzzed like a hive. Assistants rushed past Avery's glass wall with armfuls of folders. The copier down the hall spat paper like confetti, and someone had turned the coffee machine into a war zone of spilled grounds and sugar packets. None of it reached her office. Her door was shut, her chair was steady. Her heart was not. She reread the board deck for the 5th time, but the words swam. Q4 performance. Capital expenditure. Restructuring. Custodial contract consolidation. Her eyes snagged on one bullet point and stayed there. Open quote. Facilities and operations cost optimization proposal FY next. Close quote. Underneath, janitorial services, outsourcing, headcount reduction. She'd seen it last week, buried under efficiency recommendations. It had been easy to skim past then, one more thing to negotiate, tweak, postpone. Today it stared back like a loaded question. Her intercom buzzed. "Miss Locke, the catering team is here with the breakfast spread. Do you want to approve the setup in the boardroom?" Avery glanced at the time. 8:49. "I'll come in a minute," she said. "Make sure the name cards are correct." "Yes, ma'am." She hung up and let her gaze drift, not to the skyline, but to the faint smear on the bottom edge of her window. Weeks ago, she'd watched that same janitor, Malik, polish the glass late at night, his reflection a dark shadow against the city lights. She hadn't thought about him then. Not really. She thought about him now. "Don't talk to me. Just do your job." The memory tasted sour. A knock. She expected an assistant, but when she called, "Come in," it was not a suit that entered. Malik stepped through with a yellow caution wet floor sign tucked under one arm and a neatly folded towel over his shoulder. "Sorry to bother you, Miss Locke," he said, staying close to the door. "I just wanted to check the chair one more time before your meeting. Make sure nothing shifted." She almost told him no. The instinct came fast, automatic, distance, control, no interruptions, but her hip still remembered the sharp stab of pain, and in 2 hours 6 board members would be watching her every move, every wobble. She swallowed. "Fine. Make it quick." He nodded and crossed the room. The faint scent of citrus cleaner followed him, clean and grounding. He didn't speak as he turned the chair slightly, testing the wheels, giving a subtle push that made it roll and stop without a squeak. "How's your hip?" he asked quietly. She blinked. "My hip? You hit it earlier," he said. "On the armrest you grabbed here." He gestured vaguely at his own side, not her body, as if careful not to point. "It's fine," she said, surprised to realize it was true. "Just a bruise." "Bruises tell you where stress went," he said. "Good to pay attention." Again with the metaphors. Again with the way his words cut deeper than they had any right to. "That'll hold," he finished, giving the armrest a firm press. "You shouldn't have any problems." "Good." She folded her hands on the desk. "Thank you." He nodded and stepped back. She could have left it there. Instead, the question slipped out like it had been waiting. "Is it true?" she asked. He paused. "Is what true?" "That these chairs are cheap but pretty," she said. "That we bought them in bulk." He watched her for a moment, catching that she wasn't really asking about furniture. "You can tell a lot about a company by what they make comfortable," he said carefully. "If the lobby's got fancy chairs, but the night shift sits on metal stools, that says something." Avery's chest tightened. "And what do we say?" He hesitated. "Not my place to answer, ma'am." Irritation flared. "You had opinions earlier." He met her eyes. "You told me not to talk to you, remember." Heat rose under her carefully applied foundation. She bit down on the immediate defense. I didn't mean it, because she had meant it in that moment with every brittle piece of her. I was under a lot of pressure, she said instead. It's an important day. He didn't nod, didn't rush to reassure her. Just said, everyone's under pressure somewhere in this building, like he was stating weather. The words landed with more weight than any compliment. Miss Locke? The intercom crackled again. The board members are starting to arrive on the lower floor. Security says Mr. Whitaker is already here. Avery straightened instinctively. I'll be right there. Malik stepped back from the desk. I'll get out of your way. She watched him turn toward the door, something twisting in her chest. She thought of the slide in her deck, the neat bullet points about cutting custodial costs, about third-party optimization. Mr. Harris, she said. He stopped, hand on the handle. Yes, ma'am. She almost asked him how many jobs he worked, whether he had kids, how many nights he'd spent in this building while people like her pretended the floors just magically stayed clean. Instead, she asked, how long have you worked here? 7 years, he said. Started part-time nights, went full-time a few years back. 7 years, she repeated. Tenure like that is rare. His mouth quirked, not quite a smile. Janitors aren't exactly a hot commodity industry-wide. Her throat tightened around an apology she couldn't form. Thank you for fixing the chair, she said again, because it was the only thing she knew how to say without her voice cracking. You did good work, he nodded. That's the job. He left, and the door closed softly behind him. For a long moment, Avery just sat there, fingers pressed into the arms of her newly reinforced chair, feeling the steadiness beneath her and the tremor inside her. You told him not to talk to you, something inside whispered. But you're about to talk about his job without him in the room. She pushed the thought away and stood, smoothing her dress over the curve of her hips. She knew how she looked in this outfit, powerful, deliberately feminine. Thick thighs hugged by the fabric, waist cinched, neckline drawing the eye up to her face where she could control the story. Her body had been an obstacle in rooms like this before. Today, she decided it would be armor. She grabbed the board packet, stacked it neatly, and strode out into the hallway. The boardroom was an aquarium of glass and polished wood. Catering had laid out an obscene spread, croissants, smoked salmon, fruit arranged like artwork. An assistant was fussing with name cards, moving Whitaker half an inch to the left at her direction. One more thing, Avery told him. Lose the printed efficiency proposal sign. It feels premature. He blinked. Yes, Miss Locke. As he scurried off, the door at the far end opened. Gregory Whitaker stepped in, silver hair, expensive suit, the relaxed confidence of a man used to being the most important person in the room. Avery, he said, smiling like they were old friends. Big day. Good morning, Greg, she replied, crossing the room with a practiced sway, heels whispering against the carpet. She shook his hand, feeling his eyes flick down, then up, taking in the curve of her hips, the shape of her waist, and then, almost begrudgingly, her face. He did this every time. She noticed every time. How are you feeling? He asked. Ready to defend that budget? I'm ready to discuss what's best for the company, she said lightly. As always, he chuckled. Good answer. As more board members trickled in, Avery slid into the familiar dance, greeting, small talk, strategically timed compliments. But underneath, the knot in her stomach tightened. She could feel the slide waiting in the deck like a landmine. Facilities and operations cost optimization. She knew exactly which bullet points they would circle, which lines they'd call low-hanging fruit. A trickle of water caught her attention. She turned. In the corner of the room, near the floor-to-ceiling windows, a thin, glistening line snaked down from the ceiling and landed in the carpet with a soft, betraying pat. Another drop, then another. You've got to be kidding me. Is that water? One of the board members said, wrinkling her nose. Avery felt all the blood drain from her face. It's nothing, she said quickly. Probably just condensation. I'll have someone... The drop became a slight but steady drip, tapping out a rhythm into the plush rug. Greg raised an eyebrow. This building cost how many millions? Heat rushed to Avery's cheeks. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a symbol. A leak in her first board meeting. As if the universe wanted to underline every insecurity she had. She grabbed the phone on the sideboard and hit building services again. Facilities, the same bored voice answered. "This is Avery Locke in the boardroom on 35, she said, barely keeping her voice steady. "We have water leaking from the ceiling. I need someone here now." "Yes, Miss Locke. I'll send Malik up, right?" "Fine," she snapped, hanging up. She turned back to the room, forcing a calm she did not feel. "Minor issue," she said, as casually as she could. "It'll be handled." Greg glanced at his watch. "We'll need to start on time. We've all got other meetings." "I understand," she said. 2 minutes later, the door opened again. Malik stepped in carrying the yellow caution sign, a bucket, and a small flashlight. His coveralls looked almost painfully out of place among the tailored suits and silk blouses. 6 pairs of eyes turned to him, assessing, dismissing. "Sorry for the intrusion," he said. His voice was calm, but Avery saw the flicker of tension in his jaw. "Got a report of a leak?" "Yes," she said. "Over here." He walked past the long table, bucket swinging lightly, sign under his arm. As he passed behind the chairs, she caught the faint scent of his soap, the quiet weight of his presence. No one greeted him. No one said his name. To them, he was moving furniture. But he was the only one actually fixing anything. He set the bucket under the drip, opened the sign, and flicked on the flashlight, angling it up toward the ceiling tiles. Water tapped steadily into the empty plastic, each drop a little louder than it should have been. "Looks like a pipe seam," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Pressure from the cold snap." "Can you fix it?" Greg asked, impatience dripping from his tone. "I can manage it for now," Malik said evenly. "Real fix needs a plumber, but you'll be dry for the meeting." He disappeared for a moment into the hallway, then returned with a narrow ladder and a roll of plastic sheeting. As he climbed, Avery became aware of how intense the room felt, the way the board members' gazes slid over his body like he was a piece of moving equipment. He worked quickly, bracing himself carefully, shoulders flexing under the coveralls as he shifted the tile, wrapped the pipe, redirected the drip into the bucket. "This is ridiculous," one of the directors muttered under his breath. "Third leak this quarter. Facilities has gone downhill." Avery's mouth opened before she even realized she was speaking. "Facilities has been operating under deferred maintenance for 3 years," she said. "They've been patching a system nobody wanted to fund properly. The leaks are a result of that, not a lack of effort." Several heads turned. Greg's eyes narrowed slightly, studying her. Malik's hands paused for a fraction of a second on the pipe. Then he finished the wrap, set the tile back in place, and climbed down. "You should be fine for a few hours," he said, folding the ladder. "If it starts again, let me know." "Thank you," Avery said, but this time she didn't let it stop there. She added firmly, "You've been incredibly responsive. I appreciate your work." He blinked, clearly not expecting that in front of this audience. His gaze searched her face for a beat. Then he nodded once. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. As he turned to leave, Greg's voice cut through the air. "Before you go," he said, "you're with custodial, yes?" "Yes, sir," Malik replied. Greg glanced at Avery, then back at Malik. "Good to know. We'll be talking about some changes to operations today. Not your fault, of course. Just numbers." Something in Avery's chest snapped taut like a bracket shoved too far. Malik gave a brief, unreadable nod. "Understood, sir." He stepped out, the door closing behind him with the same soft click as before. Only this time, when the silence settled over the room, Avery felt its weight differently. Her chair was steady beneath her, but everything else suddenly felt like it was shifting. The board members began to take their seats, shuffling papers, clearing throats. The projector hummed to life. On the screen, the title slide appeared, Q4 Review and Strategic Efficiency Proposals, presented by Avery Locke, CEO. She took a breath. Her chest rose, the fabric of her dress tightening over her curves. 6 pairs of eyes turned her way, and all she could see in her mind's eye was a yellow caution sign, a bucket catching leaks, and a man in coveralls who had been told not to talk, about to be discussed like a line item by people who would never know his name. The projector's low hum filled the glass room like a warning. Avery stood at the head of the table, 16 eyes on her, the screen behind her glowing with the title slide that had kept her up half the night. Q4 Review and Strategic Efficiency Proposals, presented by Avery Locke, CEO. Her newly reinforced chair waited at the far end of the table, but she didn't sit yet. Standing made her feel bigger, less throwable. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Somewhere behind her, water pinged softly into the plastic bucket Malik had left beneath the patched leak. The sound was faint but persistent, like a heartbeat. "Whenever you're ready, Avery," Greg said, leaning back with his hands folded over his stomach. She forced a slow breath. Her dress hugged her curves as her chest rose and fell, fabric pulling tight across her full bust for a moment before settling again. She could feel every inch of her body, every place she took up space in this room she'd fought to stand in. "Good morning," she began, voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you all for being here." She walked them through the opening slides. Q4 performance, revenue upticks, losses reframed as investments, the usual delicate dance. The numbers were good. Not spectacular, but solid. Enough to keep the wolves curious instead of hungry. Minutes slipped by. She hit her marks. She answered questions. She navigated Greg's little interruptions and the occasional condescending, "That's ambitious," with practiced poise. But the closer she got to the efficiency section, the more the chair called to her. The more she felt the steady weight of it waiting, held together by the hands of a man about to be turned into savings. Her finger hovered over the clicker. "Next slide covers operations cost optimization," Greg said smoothly, as if he were helping. The part we're all very interested in. Avery's thumb pressed the button. The slide flashed up in cold, neat font. Open quote. "Facilities and operations cost optimization FY next. Outsource custodial services to third-party vendor. Reduce in-house staff by 60%. Consolidate night shift coverage. Projected annual savings $2.3 million. Close quote. The room leaned in. A couple of them actually smiled. "There it is," one director murmured. Avery's mouth went dry. She heard Malik's voice in her head. "You can tell a lot about a company by what they make comfortable." She looked at the slide. She saw bullet points. She also saw a yellow caution sign. A bucket. A bent chair bracket. 7 years of someone quietly fixing what everyone else broke. "Walk us through this," Greg said. "It's a strong lever." "Strong lever. Weakest joint." Avery swallowed. "This proposal was scoped with the finance team," she began. "It focuses on outsourcing our custodial staff to a vendor who—" Her voice faltered. A droplet of water hit the bucket behind her, plink, and everyone looked up in faint irritation before refocusing on her. They weren't hearing it, but she was. "Bruises tell you where stress went. Who can provide coverage at a lower hourly cost?" she finished mechanically. "With projected savings of—" "A little higher churn, I assume," one man interrupted. "But it's a commodity function. The market's full of people who mop floors." The phrase hit her like a slap. People who mop floors. Her father's hands flashed through her mind, cracked, oil-stained from years as a mechanic. The way he'd come home exhausted and still managed to fix her busted bike with a patience no spreadsheet could quantify. Her hip throbbed faintly at the memory of the chair slamming into it. Her fingers tensed around the clicker. "Actually," she heard herself say, "I have some concerns about this recommendation." Greg's head snapped toward her. "Concerns?" Every gaze shifted, sudden and sharp. "You're the CEO," she reminded herself. "Act like it." "Yes," she said, straighter now. "The savings look clean on paper, but they assume what we do here is just surfaces, trash cans, floors." She forced herself not to look at the bucket. "That's not accurate." "Avery," Greg said in the tone of a man reminding a child of the rules, "we've talked about this. The core business is software and services. Everything else is support. And what happens when the support fails?" she countered. "This morning, 10 minutes before this meeting, we had a leak in this very room. Malik, one of our in-house custodial staff, had it contained in under 5 minutes. We didn't have to cancel, reschedule, panic about equipment damage." "That's their job," another director said. "A vendor could do the same." "Could they?" she asked, heat rising in her voice. "Because what I saw was someone who knew this building, who knew that this corner has had pressure problems in winter before. Someone who's been here 7 years, who cares enough to check the CEO's chair twice because he didn't want her hitting the floor in front of you." The room went very, very still. Avery realized her hand was gripping the back of her own chair, fingers pressed into the leather. The reinforced bracket held. "You're emotional about this," Greg said, measured. "I understand, new role, big decisions, but this is exactly why we have the numbers. 2.3 million in savings is not insignificant." I'm not emotional, she lied, even as her chest burned. I'm analytical. We have costs when things break. We had a server room flooding incident 2 years ago because a third-party crew missed a hairline crack in a joint. That outage cost us almost what this proposal claims will save. And we tightened oversight after that. Another director said, "We can do the same here." At whose expense? The words came out before she could bury them. The people who keep this place functioning while we're at home. The ones you walk past like they're part of the furniture. Greg's jaw hardened. Careful, Avery. She knew that tone. It meant remember which side you're on. For most of her career, she'd obeyed it, smoothed herself down into whatever shape they needed to feel comfortable signing her checks. Something in her refused to bend this time. Here's what I'm proposing instead, she said, forcing each word to be calm, clear, undeniable. We table the custodial outsourcing for this fiscal year. We commission a proper cost impact study that models not just hourly rates, but downtime risk, asset damage, and the retention cost of people who already understand our infrastructure. In the meantime, we look for savings in areas that don't involve cutting the people holding up the roof. Like what? Greg challenged. She clicked to the next slide. She had stayed up long after midnight, creating it on a hunch she hadn't fully admitted to herself. Alternate cuts. Executive travel consolidation. The ridiculous fresh flower budget for the lobby. The catered innovation breakfasts that always ended in uneaten pastries and buzzwords. We start with non-critical perks at the top, she said. We cut where it's pretty, not where it's load-bearing. That'll ruffle feathers, someone muttered. So will firing the man who stopped this room from turning into a slip-and-fall lawsuit, she shot back, then immediately checked herself. Tone. Tone. A long, charged silence. Greg steepled his fingers. You're staking a lot of capital on janitors, Avery. I'm staking it on the principle that you don't kick out the people quietly, preventing disasters, so that our croissants can stay artisanal, she said. If we want this company to survive long-term, we can't keep acting like the weakest joint is always the cheapest line item. It was a risk. She knew it. She could see it in the way some of them shifted, in the way Greg's gaze cooled. But she also noticed something else. A director in the middle, a woman who rarely spoke, watching her with a hint of something like respect. After a beat, the woman cleared her throat. I'd like to see the full cost-impact analysis she's suggesting, she said. And I agree the optics of cutting staff like that right now, especially given our diversity and community statements, might be unwise. Another director nodded slowly. A year's delay on this line won't sink us, he said, especially if we can claw back some of these other perks. Greg's eyes darted between them, calculating. He didn't like losing clean numbers. He liked losing board votes even less. Fine, he said at last, the word clipped. We'll table the outsourcing proposal pending further analysis, but I want that report by end of Q1, Avery, and it had better be airtight. It will be, she said, pulse pounding. The meeting moved on, but something had shifted. She felt it in the way she sat down at last, the chair solid beneath her. She felt it each time someone asked a question and didn't immediately look to Greg for the answer. By the time it ended, her throat was raw and her brain was a buzzing blur, but she'd kept the line. For one man who fixed chairs and patched leaks. For everyone like him. As the board filtered out, she shook hands, accepted polite compliments and cooler non-committal ones. Greg held her gaze a moment longer than necessary. You're playing a dangerous game, he murmured under his breath. So are you, she replied, smiling just enough that it could be mistaken for a joke. When the last of them left, the room finally emptied. The bucket under the patched leak was almost dry now, just a few stray drops clinging to the plastic. Avery picked it up and carried it herself. She found Malik halfway down the hallway near the service elevator, wiping a handprint off the wall. He straightened as she approached, surprise flickering across his face when he saw who it was. Ms. Locke, he said. Everything hold up okay? She held up the bucket slightly. Dry, she said. Thanks to you. He gave a small nod. Glad it cooperated. She shifted the bucket to one hand, suddenly aware of how strange she must look in her perfectly tailored dress holding building hardware. For once, she didn't care. I talked about you in there, she said. His brows rose. In the board meeting? Yes, she huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. in a way that would probably mortify you. I didn't use your name, but I used your work to argue against cutting your job." He studied her for a long moment. "And did it work?" "For now," she said honestly. "I got them to table the outsourcing proposal. We're doing a real analysis instead of just slashing the lowest paid people and calling it efficiency." A slow exhale left his chest. Something eased in his shoulders, but only a little. "Numbers have long memories," he said. "They might come back to it." "I know," she said, "but I won't pretend it's invisible anymore. Not your work, not you." Her throat tightened. "About earlier when I told you not to talk to me." He shook his head quickly. "You don't have to." "Yes," she cut in, more forceful than she meant. "I do." She set the bucket down between them like a neutral object, then forced her hands to relax at her sides. "I was scared," she said. The admission tasted raw. "Not of you. Of them, of failing in front of them. I took that out on the person who was actually trying to keep me from falling. That was ugly and unfair, and I'm sorry." He watched her, expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, the tightness around his mouth softened. "Most people don't notice when they do that," he said quietly, "let alone apologize." "I notice a lot of things I wish I didn't," she said with a wry twist of her lips. "It's part of the job." "Fixing things after they break?" he asked. "Trying to make sure they don't," she replied. He glanced past her down the hallway toward the boardroom, then back at her again. "You did more than most would, looking out for people you don't have to see." "I do see you," she said before she could overthink it. "For the record." A ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. It did something strange to her stomach. "That's good," he said, "because we're the ones who'll be here tonight, making sure that leak doesn't come back while you're asleep." She swallowed, her earlier defensiveness gone, replaced by something warmer, heavier. "I'll be here late," she said, still working on that airtight report they demanded. "If the chair makes any suspicious noises, can I?" "Call me," he finished, one brow lifting. "Yes." She felt silly, but she held his gaze. "And if you have thoughts about how operations actually runs down here, I'd like to hear them. Not just the numbers, the bruises, where the stress goes." He studied her face, searching for the catch. When he didn't find one, his shoulders relaxed by another inch. "You sure?" he asked. "Last time I talked, it got me in trouble." "Last time I was wrong," she said simply. "Talk to me, Malik, please." The please felt like another little bracket bending back into place, stronger than before. He nodded once. "All right, Miss Locke, I'll talk." "Avery," she corrected, surprising herself, "when it's just us." He looked at her, really looked, the way no one in that glass aquarium upstairs ever did, seeing past the curves and the dress and the title to the woman standing barefoot on new ground. "Avery," he repeated, the name warm in his mouth. For the first time that day, her smile wasn't practiced. It just arrived. She picked up the bucket again, lighter now somehow, and stepped back. "I'll see you tonight, then," she said. "I'll be around," he replied. "That's kind of the job." As she walked away, the floor under her heels felt less like a stage and more like something shared, a building held up by more than steel and glass, by more than numbers and titles, by people, by hands that fixed weak joints before anyone else knew they were cracking. And this time, Avery promised herself, she wasn't going to tell those hands to be quiet.